Hi everyone, this is Ankur from Fin Study Club, welcoming all viewers to the session on decision making, wherein we would be talking about the decision theory, again part of the traditional finance, and try and compare it with the bounded rationality. I just hope that before looking at this session, you have already looked at the session on the basics of behavioral finance that we did before that, because the bounded rationality has already been discussed, introduced, so to speak, in that context. Let me start by explaining what the decision theory is all about. It is vertical of a traditional finance, which is a normative approach to decision making. It simply means, let's not get into the heavy words. It simply means that people are going to be rational. This is again the fundamental of REM, and their whole objective is to maximize the utility. They do that by looking at the expected outcomes. So, in simple words, if faced with two options, 100% chance of $50, and on the other hand 90% chance of $60 and 10% chance of $0, they are going to calculate the expected value. So here the expected value is going to be $50, 54 plus 0. Here it is going to be $54. So they will choose this particular option compared to the other one. So the rational men in traditional finance are always expected to choose something with greater expected value. They would not estimate, or should I say overestimate, the probability of making a loss. So they are very objective and mathematical, so to speak. As per traditional finance, risk is something which is measurable, and uncertainty. So risk is differentiated from uncertainty, and uncertainty is said to be unknowable variable, and this is something which traditional finance ignores for the purpose of their decision making in that sense. Moving on to something called as a bounded rationality. Now, the bounded rationality is knowing the fact that your rationales are bounded, they are limited. The four axioms that we have spoken about in the in traditional finance, some of them or all of them have been violated. They are not true practically if you look at them, and the reason for that is the knowledge limitation or cognitive limitation. I'm going to come back to let's say this part in the end, because that's really the summary of this entire stuff. But try and look at and take your personal examples. There are, let's say, if I talk about, let's say, where to do your graduation from. Now there are about 100 schools in which you can choose, let's say, 5 streams. So overall, there are 500 options that you have. Okay, a combination of school plus stream. But do you think a human mind would be able to, first of all, possess absolutely flawless knowledge about all these 500 options in terms of their career prospects, their teaching quality, their the quality of books, the quality of assignments, the placements, etc., etc.? All these 500 options would not be able to be analyzed, would not be able to be, let's say, kind of, you not be able to derive the information about all of that. So that's something called as a knowledge limitation. It is the inability to have full information on any particular subject. Let us assume that out of these 300 you've been able to draw information on, out of this 500 you've been able to draw information on 300 options. Now there is another limitation that you have, which is called as a cognitive limitation, which means that given this information, whatever information that you've been able to derive, you would still not be able to process it efficiently. Ultimately, it's a human mind. You think that you would be able to objectively assess 300 options in a way? I really have big doubts on that. Let me take a very contextual example here. In your level 1, your alternative investment is roughly worth 3 to 4%. I think now it has become 4%, while your fixed financial reporting and analysis is 20%. Now you have to answer yourself, Did you put in one fifth of the effort into AI as much as you did in FRA? Answer is going to be big no. AI was one of the areas which you had put into the C category bucket, saying that even if you don't do well here, you would still be able to, clear the exam with a balance 96% of the hard work. That means, as a human being, your effort into AI was not 4% of your total effort, or let's say your the importance that you had given to AI was not pro rata in context of the marks or the weightage that it had. It was much lesser. On the other hand, ethics was 15%. You gave ethics a lot of your heart and soul because it was one of the strongly tested areas in the exam. So the ethics and AI are not being done in proportion. AI is done much lesser with much lesser intensity, and ethics is done with much greater intensity. This is what is bounded rationality. It says that the investor, the consumer, are not utility maximizing machines which are theoretically, let's say an algorithm being run to take the correct decision and would be able to gather information on 500 and then analyze the information on each of those. The human beings practice satisfaction which are sufficient, to give them a threshold happiness. Now, threshold happiness is what you have to understand to be able to appreciate the bounded rationality. You sometimes would prefer to buy a piece of, let's say, product, from a neighborhood to maximize your convenience rather than going and driving 20 miles to still buy a much cheaper product inclusive of the petrol and the gas cost and all the depreciation of your vehicle, etc. So even on a landed cost basis, your net cost is higher when you buy it from your neighborhood, but you still try and get some convenience out of it. You have to satisfy yourself, no doubt about it, but you do not have to satisfy yourself to the last decimal of the penny spent. You just look at the sufficiency of it. So satisfy plus suffice gives us a new word under bounded rationality called as satisfy. So in all the forthcoming slides, whenever I would say satisfy or suffice, I would essentially be talking about satisfies. Okay, taking a question just to make sure that we understand the concept of bounded rationality well. There is an individual who has recently found that she is being transferred to a new city. Okay, maybe a work related change. She wants to buy a house in the new city, but her firm is asking her to report to the new office in a week, which tells me that she would not get enough time to make a comprehensive information collection and then on the basis of the collected information make a flawless judgmental call. She decides to rent for a year in a new location even though rents are high relative to the cost of borrowing. This is the irrational behavior that she is exhibiting. Theoretically speaking, traditionally speaking, as far as traditional finance is concerned, I am going to put in money only where my returns are maximum. So between the rent and the new house, if my new house cost me less in context of depreciation and maintenance cost, I'm going to go for that. This is what traditional finance tells me. But this is not what this human being has effectively done. What her plan is to rent an accommodation for a year, and then during the year, then maybe look for a better house, and then obviously shift from the second year onwards. So, in making the decision to rent instead of buy, this individual has in fact violated the rational behavior and has exhibited the bounded rationality. So, there is some bit of rational thinking also because she has realized the fact, she appreciates the fact that you know staying on rent is more expensive, but that's bounded, you know because she couldn't move to absolutely the theoretically correct option, which is of buying right at t0 right now. So there is some kind of a limitation to his rational decision making because of, again, the convenience issue that she is seeking, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I hope that this small discussion on the decision theory versus bounded rationality is much better cleared.